They looked untouchable from the outside. Red carpets, award speeches, that polished, practiced smile that says we're fine, even when the flashbulbs catch the tiniest crack in the glass. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman were the kind of couple people used as proof that Hollywood love could survive. The kind of couple strangers defended online like it was their own marriage, and that's why no one noticed the rule. Not the official rule, not the one written anywhere. The private rule that lived in their house like a quiet security system. There was one door you didn't open. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just one of those celebrity quirks, the kind assistants learn without asking questions. Contractors were told not to touch it. Housekeepers were told to dust around it but never handle the lock. A friend once joked about it at a dinner party, and the joke died so suddenly, the whole table felt colder. Nicole laughed a little too late. Keith didn't laugh at all. People would have assumed it was harmless. A wine cellar, a studio, a panic room. Something rich people do because they can. But if you stood in that hallway long enough, you'd catch something else. A faint smell, like old paper warmed by electronics. A soft hum that didn't belong to any appliance, and once, if the house was quiet enough, the sound of something mechanical resetting, like a timer clicking back to zero. The weird thing is, the door didn't look special. It was plain, modern, almost boring. The kind of door your eyes slide past. That's what made it genius. Hide the secret in something that doesn't want attention. And it worked for years. Until it didn't. Because secrets in beautiful houses don't stay quiet forever. They don't stay polite, they don't stay behind doors. They leak. They leak in the way someone's voice changes when a certain topic comes up. They leak in a sudden, sharp argument that ends with forced smiles the next morning. They leak when a person starts sleeping in a different wing of the house. Because of work. And then one day, a single rumour landed in the right inbox. It wasn't from a paparazzi. It wasn't from a tabloid writer. It wasn't even from someone hungry for money. It came from someone tired. A person who'd watched the hallway for too long and realised the door wasn't just about privacy. It was about control. The message was short. No signature. No pleasantries. If you're still pretending this is a fairy tale, you're late. Attached was a photo taken from far away through a window. Grainy, imperfect, almost useless. Almost. Because the timestamp was what mattered. The timestamp and the detail nobody could explain away. Nicole standing in the hallway at 2:14 a.m, barefoot, hair loose, not dressed for cameras, holding something small and dark in her hand. A key. Not a normal key, not the kind you'd buy at a hardware store. A thin black key card, like the kind used for hotel rooms. Except this one had no branding, no logo, just one handwritten number in silver ink. 7. That was the first time the number showed up. After that, it started appearing everywhere, like a ghost leaving fingerprints. A hotel invoice with a room number changed by hand, 707. A studio booking labelled KU, Session 7. A single line in a printed schedule someone forgot to shred. N, 7 hour, private. People told themselves it meant nothing, but the people close to them weren't asking what the number meant. They were asking why the number only showed up when the couple stopped behaving like a couple, because something shifted around that time. A subtle shift, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Nicole's eyes would scan a room like she was checking exits. Keith, usually easygoing, started feeling sharp around the edges, like a guitar string tuned too tight. And then came the little things. A bodyguard replaced without explanation. A long-time assistant gone overnight. A friend taking space and refusing to say from what. The story the public got was simple. Schedules, pressure, normal married stress. The kind of vague explanations people accept because the truth is messy and nobody wants to carry it. But behind the scenes, in the kind of quiet rooms where people whisper instead of speak, a different narrative formed. They weren't drifting apart, they were negotiating, not like lovers negotiating, like partners negotiating, like two people trying to split a kingdom without setting it on fire. And the door was part of it, because that door wasn't just a door, it was a vault for something that could ruin them both. The part the public never sees about celebrity marriages is this: love is only half of it. The other half is logistics, contracts, image, old mistakes, old promises, things that don't go away when the feelings do. And then there's the third part. The third part is the thing nobody wants to name: the leverage. One night, months before the official split, a guest stayed late after a private dinner. Not a star, not a producer, someone quieter. Someone who didn't want photos and didn't need them. They walked down that hallway by accident, looking for a bathroom. They later swore it was an accident, but they also swore they heard voices behind the door. Nicole's voice, low and controlled, the voice she uses when she's acting calm for someone else's sake. And Keith's voice, not loud but carrying a kind of contained panic. A pause. Then Nicole said something that stuck in the guest's mind like a splinter. If it comes out, it ends your career. If it stays buried, it ends us. The guest froze. Because when someone says that, you can't pretend you didn't hear it. They backed away quietly like a thief in someone else's life. And the next morning, Nicole hosted brunch like nothing happened. Like there wasn't a locked door in her house, holding the kind of truth that could turn headlines into weapons. Keith played guitar for their guests, smiled. Charming. But one hand kept tapping his knee over and over, like he was counting time. Counting down. That was the week the word divorce started circulating in private conversations, not as gossip, but as an inevitability. And still, nobody knew what the secret was. Not exactly, just enough fragments to build a shadow. A number, 7, a locked door, a keycard. And a sentence that sounded like a threat wrapped in a confession. Then another message came in, days later, from the same anonymous sender. No photo this time, just a line. Just a, "You want the real reason, find out what happened in room 7. And suddenly the fairy tale had an address. Not a metaphorical room, a real one. A physical space somewhere in the world that had held something significant enough to haunt them years later. Something that wasn't meant to survive. Something that had witnesses. Because secrets don't just hurt people. They recruit people. They pull others into the orbit until someone finally can't take it anymore and decides to burn the whole system down. And the scariest part, the sender wasn't asking for money. They weren't bargaining. They were warning. Which meant one thing: whatever was in room 7 was already moving, already breathing, already awake. And Keith and Nicole were just the last to find out. Room 7 didn't exist on any official map. That was the first thing that made it dangerous. Hotels are good at erasing themselves. Renovations, renumbering. Entire floors quietly rebranded so a past incident doesn't follow the building forever. Room 7 had been updated twice, absorbed once into a suite, then split again. On paper it was clean. In reality it was stubborn. People who stayed there remembered it without knowing why. A strange pressure in the ears, a sense that the room didn't like being alone. One former cleaner described it like this: "You could feel when no one had slept there yet, like the bed was waiting." The first verified record tied to Keith and Nicole was old. Older than their marriage. Older than most people assume their story even began. A music festival overseas. A charity gala attached to it. One night between obligations. One night officially labelled as rest. Room 7. What happened inside depends on who you ask. And everyone who knows something knows a different version. The safest version, the one lawyers prefer, is that it was a misunderstanding. Too much alcohol. Poor judgment. A private argument that escalated and then vanished into apologies. But the unsafe version is the one that won't stay buried. Because there were witnesses, not paparazzi, not fans hiding behind curtains, people who don't show up in glossy stories, staff, security. A technician called in after midnight to fix a sound issue. He later told a friend that he never finished the job. He heard shouting before he even knocked. Not yelling. Controlled voices pushed too far. The kind that shake more than scream. Then silence. A long, unnatural silence. When the door finally opened, Keith was alone, shirt wrinkled, knuckles red like he'd punched a wall or something softer that fought back differently. He told the technician the issue was resolved. He tipped him too much consideration money. And when the technician glanced past him, he saw Nicole sitting on the edge of the bed, still, staring at the carpet like she was memorizing it. That image followed the technician for years. Because people don't sit like that after normal arguments. They sit like that after realizing something irreversible just happened. What the public never hears is that some moments don't explode immediately. They compress. They sit dormant, gaining density. They wait until the conditions are right. Room 7 was one of those moments. After that night, everything between them shifted into a different gear. Not colder, more careful. Like two people walking across thin ice, who know exactly where it cracked before. They didn't separate. They didn't confess. They didn't collapse. They built. They built a marriage so polished it could blind you. They built routines. They built interviews that sounded rehearsed because they were. They built a public narrative so stable it drowned out the quieter, uglier truth. And they built safeguards. The door at the house wasn't installed randomly. It replaced a room that had once been ordinary. After the renovation, it had no official name, no label on the blueprint, just an internal note marked with a number. 7 inside were hard drives, printed emails, a burner phone sealed in plastic, a hotel keycard that never got returned, and one envelope. Inside the envelope was a handwritten agreement. Not legal, not notarized. Just 2 signatures and a set of conditions. No interviews about that year. No memoir chapters touching that trip. No creative reinterpretations. If one went down, the other followed. Mutual destruction, disguised as loyalty. That's why the marriage lasted longer than people expected. Fear is incredibly stabilizing. But fear also decays. Years later, when the love softened into habit and the habit into distance, the agreement stopped feeling protective and started feeling like a hostage situation. Nicole was the first to feel it crack. She stopped talking about certain roles she turned down, roles that hit too close to something unnamed. She became hyper-aware of rooms, of exits, of locked doors. On sets, she asked for doors to be kept open, then pretended it was about airflow. Keith noticed, but noticing didn't mean fixing. His way of coping was movement. Tours, sessions, noise. Anything that kept him from sitting alone with memory. Anything that drowned out the echo of that night. Room 7 wasn't following them loudly. It followed them patiently. The anonymous messages started when someone realised the safeguards were aging. Hard drives fail. Paper yellows. People talk when they think no one is listening. The sender wasn't threatening to expose everything. Not yet. They were testing. Testing who would panic first. Testing who would break the agreement. And it almost worked. Because the divorce didn't begin with lawyers. It began with a question asked at the wrong time. Nicole asked it late one night, standing in that hallway, keycard in hand. "What happens," she said quietly, "if I stop protecting this?" Keith didn't answer immediately. He looked tired, older, like someone who'd been holding their breath for years and forgot what oxygen felt like. Finally he said, "Then it stops being just ours." That was the moment she knew the marriage was already over, because marriages survive secrets only when both people want them buried. And she didn't anymore. The divorce announcement, when it came, was clean, respectful, carefully worded, the kind that reassures fans and investors alike. But behind it, the clock started ticking. Room 7 wasn't a metaphor. It was a location, a file, a memory, and a liability. And somewhere, someone had decided the story was worth telling. Not for money, for release. Because secrets don't disappear when you lock them away. They just wait for the right person to open the door. Every story like this has a lie people cling to. In this one, the lie was simple. That Room 7 only ever held 2 people. It didn't. There was a third name attached to that night. Not on paper, not in schedules, but in the kind of memory that doesn't fade, no matter how much time you throw at it. He wasn't famous, that's why he mattered. He was hired for something forgettable, a technical role. One of those people whose job is to make sure the show works and then disappear before anyone learns your name. He moved between venues, hotels, back entrances, invisible by design. And he was sober. That detail comes up again and again in every version of the story, because it ruins the convenient excuses. No alcohol blur. No, maybe I imagined it. He remembered the night cleanly. Too cleanly. He was called to Room 7 twice. The first time, early evening. Minor issue. Audio bleed from an adjacent suite. He fixed it in 10 minutes. Nicole thanked him politely. Keith nodded without really seeing him. Normal enough. The second call came just after midnight. Different tone. Urgent. Security waiting in the hallway. Tense, but pretending not to be. The kind of tension people get when they've been told to stay quiet and don't know why. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Keith opened the door just enough to block the view. Said the issue had resolved itself. Said it firmly, the way you say something you need to be true. The technician should have left. Instead, he made a mistake people like him don't usually make. He looked past. That was all it took. The room looked wrong. Not destroyed, not dramatic. Wrong in a subtler way, like something had happened fast and then been frozen. Nicole was sitting on the floor this time, not the bed. Back against the frame. Shoes off. Hands clenched in her lap so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked up, and for a split second their eyes met. That was the moment he became part of the story, whether he wanted to or not, because people don't forget that look. Not fear, not anger, recognition. The look of someone realizing another human being now knows something they can never unknow. Keith shut the door. Too late. Security walked the technician back to the elevator without a word. He was paid. He was thanked. He was told his services wouldn't be needed again that night. He went home and didn't sleep. He told himself it was none of his business. He told himself celebrities fight differently. He told himself silence was professionalism. And for years that worked. Until it didn't. Because silence ages badly when you carry it alone. He watched their marriage from a distance. Interviews, smiles, speeches about support and growth. The story everyone else saw. But he also noticed what they avoided. No mention of that festival. No photos from that night. A gap in timelines that never quite lined up. He didn't want revenge, he didn't want money. He wanted something simpler and harder. He wanted the pressure to stop. The messages didn't start as threats. They started as questions sent into the void, to see if anyone else remembered. Do you remember room 7? Do you remember who else was there? Do you remember me? No reply. That's when he realised something important. They weren't forgetting. They were counting on everyone else to forget first. The first photo he sent wasn't dramatic on purpose. He wanted to see how they'd react to proof that wasn't explosive. A test shot. A tap on the glass. The reaction came fast. Not publicly. Privately. A call from a block number. Silence on the line. Breathing. Then a familiar voice. Older now. Rougher around the edges. You shouldn't be doing this. Not a question. Not a plea. A statement. That's when he knew the power had shifted. He didn't answer. He hung up. Because this was never about exposure. It was about symmetry. About making the weight unevenly distributed for once. Room 7 had ruined his sense of proportion. Made small things feel dangerous. Made locked doors feel alive. He'd lost relationships because he couldn't explain why he hated hotels. Why he avoided hallways at night. He didn't want them destroyed. He wanted them honest. And honesty, in their world, was the most dangerous thing imaginable. The divorce announcement hit him differently than it did everyone else. To the public, it was sad but expected. To him, it was a signal. The agreement was breaking. Which meant the envelope behind the door was no longer safe. Which meant someone would eventually blink. So he sent one last message. Not to both of them. Just to one. Nicole, it read, I don't want to burn it down. I want it acknowledged. If you don't, someone else will. She read it. She didn't reply, but the next day, the door in the house was unlocked for the first time in years, and inside the safeguards were no longer intact, because secrets rely on cooperation. And cooperation had finally run out. Leaks are rarely loud, that's the first myth. People imagine a dramatic drop, a headline, a document splashed across the internet like gasoline on fire. But the most dangerous leaks arrive quietly, almost politely, dressed as coincidence. This one showed up as a correction. A small entertainment outlet published a harmless retrospective piece. Career milestones. A timeline. The kind of article nobody questions. Buried halfway down was a single sentence that didn't belong there. During the overseas festival in the mid-2000s, sources say tensions backstage briefly delayed scheduled appearances. No accusations. No names attached to the word sources. No explanation. But the date was exact. And the festival was the one no one ever talked about. Within hours, the sentence was gone. Edited out. Quietly replaced with something smoother. But it was too late. Screenshots exist for a reason. People who live online for patterns noticed it immediately. Forums lit up. Old interviews were rewatched. Clips slowed down. Body language analysed like crime footage. The public didn't know what they were looking for yet, but they knew where to look. That's how pressure starts. Not with certainty, with curiosity. Nicole noticed first. She'd lived long enough inside the machine to recognise the shift. The tone of questions changed. Journalists stopped asking about the future and started circling the past. Early career suddenly became a favourite phrase. Keith felt it differently. Radio silence. Calls not returned. A manager suddenly obsessed with narrative alignment. People didn't accuse him of anything. They just stopped assuming. That's worse, because when the industry stops assuming, it starts preparing. The technician watched it unfold with a strange calm. He hadn't sent the leak. He didn't need to. Once a story smells blood, it hunts on its own. What surprised him was who moved first. It wasn't the tabloids. It wasn't the lawyers. It was Nicole. She reached out through an intermediary. No direct messages. No traceable contact. Just a single request passed quietly from one trusted person to another. She wanted to meet. Neutral ground. Daytime. Public place with no cameras allowed inside. They chose a museum cafe. Quiet. Open. Safe in the way only places full of strangers can be. She arrived alone. Not dressed for headlines. No armour. No performance. Just tired. She didn't apologise. That mattered. I know what you saw, she said, stirring her coffee she hadn't touched. And I know what you didn't. He didn't interrupt. Room 7 wasn't the worst thing, she continued. It was the moment after, the moment we realised fixing it would cost more than admitting it. She looked at him then, really looked. I don't want revenge, she said, and I don't want sympathy. I want control over how this ends. That was the first honest sentence anyone had said about it in years. He told her he wasn't trying to destroy anyone. He told her what the silence had done to him, how it bent his sense of reality, how it made him feel complicit just by surviving it. She listened. No defensiveness. No denial. That was new too. They didn't shake hands when they left. They didn't hug. This wasn't closure, it was alignment. The next leak wasn't messy. It was clean. A long-form profile appeared weeks later. Prestigious outlet. Respectable tone. Focused on the emotional toll of long marriages under public pressure. No accusations. No details. But one paragraph stood out. There are moments in relationships that don't explode immediately. They crystallise, and years later you realise you've been living around them, not through them. Everyone who mattered read it the same way. This wasn't an accident. This was positioning. Keith saw it too. That night he opened the door himself. The room inside hadn't changed, but he had. The agreement in the envelope felt small now. Fragile, like something written by younger people who thought silence was strength. He understood then what Nicole had already accepted. The story was coming out either way. The only remaining choice was whether it would arrive as a scandal, or as a confession shaped carefully enough to survive. Room 7 had stopped being a weapon. It had become a decision. The public never gets the truth. That's not cynicism. It's architecture. The truth is too sharp, too asymmetrical. It cuts one person deeper than the other. So what the world gets instead is a version. Balanced, edited, safe enough to touch. Nicole understood this better than anyone. When the moment came, she didn't call a lawyer first. She called a journalist she trusted not to be kind, but to be precise. Someone who knew how to say something without saying everything. The interview was framed as reflection, growth, distance. The slow unravelling of two people who loved each other, but changed. But buried in it was a shift so subtle most people missed it. She stopped saying we. She spoke in singular sentences. Ownership without accusation. Responsibility without detail. I stayed longer than I should have. There was a moment that defined more than we admitted. Some things can't be fixed by protecting them. That was the sacrifice. Not a confession. Not an exposure. A signal. Keith recognised it immediately. By not naming him, she named herself. And in doing so, she took control of the gravity. The story tilted toward her. Sympathy followed. The narrative framed her as the one who endured, who carried something too heavy for too long. Keith could have countered it. He didn't. That was his choice. Because there are two ways a story like this ends publicly. One where everyone loses, and one where only one person quietly steps back so the other doesn't fall forward into something worse. His response was brief, calm, almost too calm. No one is to blame. We loved each other deeply. Not everything needs to be explained. That last line was the tell. People heard dignity. Industry people heard containment. Room 7 never appeared by name. It never would. The technician was never mentioned. The door remained a rumour without coordinates. The envelope was destroyed quietly, the way dangerous things are when you realise they've already done their job. What survived was a shape. Enough truth to feel real. Enough silence to stay legal. Enough ambiguity to keep everyone guessing. The technician watched the coverage from a distance. He didn't feel victorious, he didn't feel cheated. He felt lighter. Because acknowledgement doesn't require details. Sometimes it only requires someone else to stop pretending nothing happened. That was the real ending. Not exposure. Not revenge. Not collapse. Release. Years later, someone would ask in an interview if there was a single moment that changed everything. Nicole would pause, smile softly, choose her words carefully. There are moments, she'd say, you don't leave right away. You build a life around them first. And then one day you realise the life is the moment. No follow-up question would land. Keith would never speak about it again. And Room 7, it would stay exactly where it always was. Not as a place, not as a scandal, but as a reminder that some stories don't end when they're told. They end when they're finally carried by the right person.